Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about the Santa Clauses Episode 1. So this is the sequel series to the Santa Claus trilogy starring Tim Allen, which started in the early to mid-90s. It just so happens that on the Collector's Cut, one of our movie podcasts that we do over MailFuzz Movies, we're working through this trilogy for December, and we've already recorded 2 of the episodes in advance. So I've just revisited the first movie, and I just saw the second movie for the first time. I've not seen the third movie yet, but, you know, I'm feeling pretty fresh on my Santa Claus knowledge. So, perfect for talking about this and seeing what this new show is. This pilot, of course, ranked highly on the Patreon pilot vote. And we're going to have a look. So Tim Allen's back as Santa Claus. Elizabeth Mitchell's back as Mrs. Claus. They have 2 kids in this that are kind of grown up. I'm going to assume that they were introduced in the third movie, but I'll find that out in the not too distant future. And it's set present day. There's a lot of referencing in the episode to it being 28 years after the first movie, and that's how long he's been doing this. I'll start spoiler free here as best I can and sort of give my impressions and whatnot. I don't love the Santa Claus movie. It's kind of perfectly fine for what it is. It has some nice moments. It has some dated Tim Allen comedy that I don't think works particularly well, but overall it's nice enough, and I think a lot of people grew up with it and have nostalgia for it. The second movie was okay, but I just saw that for the first time, so I have no attachment to those. I was actually really surprised to see Elizabeth Mitchell in such a major role in the second one, and clearly she stuck around for the franchise. So, as of yet, none of the other big actors from the first movie that were also in the second movie have come back yet. I know that Bernard, the head elf, is supposed to be showing up at some point, but he's not in this first episode. The main premise of this series seems to be that, you know, now that Tim Allen's character, Calvin, he's now at the end of his, or getting towards the end of his tenure, he's in his mid-60s now, and the magic's beginning to fade, and it looks like it's dealing a lot with the idea that a lot of children on Earth don't believe in Santa Claus as much anymore, and that's making the magic diminish. And that's something that we get throughout this first episode. So what did I think of it in general? Honestly, it's kind of a weird one to answer, just because I don't feel any particular attachment to this franchise or that original Santa Claus movie, even though I saw it a bunch as a kid. It was never my favorite Christmas movie growing up. Tim Allen, I think, can be a bit of an acquired taste, or maybe the opposite, where he was easy to like in the 90s when I didn't notice certain things about him, but now I dislike him a bit more than I used to. I don't know if that's because I know more about him in real life and his politics, or if it's just his humor feels a little bit more mean-spirited, I guess, or whatever. Not that it's so much in this particularly, but there's definitely a bit of it in the first Santa Claus movie. And there's definitely some jokes in this that made me raise an eyebrow a little bit. There's one in particular about where it's a small thing, but he kind of just complains that saying Merry Christmas to everyone has become problematic, and it did make me kind of raise an eyebrow a little bit as to, like, oh, that's a little bit of an interesting thing to swipe in there. Because I think the general idea of, like, kids don't believe in Santa as much because the modern world's a little bit different. Kids have access to the internet. People are a bit more tuned in, a bit more cynical on average, perhaps, than years gone by. And the idea of trying to rediscover the magic and still finding something to believe in, and like all that seems quite fine to me. But there's definitely a couple of little jokes in the first episode that feel they're just a little verging on kind of like a political commentary, if you will. Those moments kind of stuck out to me. Otherwise, I find it to be just kind of there. It's just, you know, it's got some whimsy, and you've got the main idea that Santa is starting to lose his power, and it's kind of presented as the joke is this is like erectile dysfunction. It kind of plays that beat a few times, not in a way where it directly mentions it, of course, because this is meant to be very suitable for children, but down to the fact where he crosses his legs when the doctor asks if there's anything wrong with his magic. There's a lot of insinuations whenever they're talking about it, where that he's embarrassed about it. It's like he's not got his libido anymore. You're an old man, you're 65, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, a little accident where his magic runs out when he's out for Christmas at the start of the episode kind of propels all these conversations and takes us into the main gist of the episode. I think, you know, the Christmas kind of jokes that the series has always had, the movies always had, is like, for example, early on there's a cover of what, Girls Just Want to Have Fun. I think it was that song anyway, but it was like they'd replaced all the lyrics with Christmassy things, and it was all about elves and things like that, and the elves are all dancing and stuff. You know, there's definitely all these kind of very Disneyified elements where it wants to promote this kind of happy Christmas vibe, and that's all fine. Obviously, it's a Christmas show, and it still does that thing that the movies did, where it tries to apply some like real world logic to it, where it's like, how does this part of the real world fit into the idea that Santa's real in the world? So in the original movie, it was a lot of like, how does he travel around so quick? How does he get into buildings that don't have fireplaces? All these kind of basic things. And there's a few things in this episode where it kind of brings up like the idea that some companies who deliver goods are like noticing there's like a segment that is unexplained for us, like where did all these items go, kind of thing. The implication being that they're being, I don't know, bought by the elves or whatever for Christmas or something like that, because they can't build everything. They don't build electronics, or at least maybe they try to, but they're not very good at it. There's kind of a joke about that later on, and how things have changed again because of that, and trying to fit that into like how the world works now with Santa being real in it. And a lot of it's just kind of, oh, it's magic, adults forget, and stuff. So I guess I'll give a bit of a spoiler warning here for the first episode, although there's not a lot to really spoil, you know, because it's mostly just setting up the premise. But there's a section early on where Santa's excited because he likes coming to this house every year, and we get a flashback to the original movie. We get a flashback to the little girl who he sees twice in the original movie. The first time he's kind of mean to her. The second time, she's replaced the milk with soy milk because he was joking that he was lactose intolerant the first time he saw her. And we get like sort of, you know, and what's interesting is the TV show is actually in the wide scope ratio, you know, the sort of the 2.4:1 ratio, which none of the movies were, unless the third one was, but I don't think it is. And it goes to the flashback, and it actually does change the ratio for the flashback. Sometimes they'll just crop it to make it match the main thing, but here they actually used the original ratio and just sort of switched, which I thought was interesting. But you know, he comes in and he's excited to see her, and the joke here is that she's, you know, like a woman in her 30s now. She's older. What's weird about this to me is the joke here is that he's like, damn, I forgot, like 20 years have went by in the blink of an eye, you're not a kid anymore. But I'm like, the implication before is that you've been doing this every single year, that you've been coming here because you're always excited to come to this house. And I get how you explain why she doesn't remember it, because there's just kind of this constant implication that the adults always forget anything to do with Santa being real, because she doesn't believe him at first, she's freaking out, thinks she's got a home intruder, but then he convinces her with the present, blah 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 blah. But like, how are you surprised? Like, she's been an adult for a long time. She's been an adult for, I mean, I don't know what age she was in the original movie exactly, but she must have been technically an adult for at least 15 years at this point. So yeah, it's a bit weird. There's a lot of weird things that are just like, ignore, don't think about it too hard, just accept the joke and go with it, which is fine. Like, it's not necessarily a bad thing if the humor is good enough. I don't necessarily know if the jokes are good enough to like carry it, sadly. I certainly don't think the family relationship that he has with his wife and his kids are carrying it either, because you have these two older kids who I guess are maybe either teenagers or maybe in their early 20s, but if they're in their early 20s, why are they living at the North Pole with them? I don't know. But they introduced this, and what's funny actually is I was asking a question when it's not out yet, but when the review for Santa Claus 2 comes out, I asked the question, well, if there's this clause that he has to have a wife, then where was the previous Santa's wife? The Santa who died in the first movie, where was his wife? And this episode actually brings that question up because Mrs. Claus, asks, what was the previous Mrs. Clauses? So she's starting to feel a bit unfulfilled in her role as Mrs. Claus. It's like, what were the previous Mrs. Clauses like? What did they do? And it kind of turns into this kind of running thing of like, do I even have a first name? And because I just watched the movie, I remembered her first name was Carol. And that's something that Tim Allen brings up. But she says, no, that was my before name. And I'm like, all right, so you lost your name because you become Mrs. Claus? I mean, surely you're just Carol Claus if you got married to Santa Claus. I don't know. I get why his name changed because he went from Scott Calvin to Santa Claus, but why is her first name changed? Like, if nothing changed your first name and now you're complaining that you don't have a first name, then surely you just have your previous first name by default. I don't know. It's a weird logic to me that I don't quite follow or understand, but it's whatever. Honestly, this is one of the weirdest and hardest things to review, I feel, because I feel like part of this is like it's not really aimed at me, and the whimsier side of it isn't going to click for me. So I'm looking at like the fun that it's trying to have with fitting Christmas into the real world and how it explains certain things, and I don't necessarily think that it's doing anything that clever with that. Some of the jokes are just kind of lame. Some of the jokes are kind of veering into Tim Allen's like sort of politics a little bit in a weird way, which I was not expecting actually. I figured just because it was a Disney thing, like he wouldn't get away with that. But there's a couple of little things, like him. He has a meeting with the elves at one point about who's naughty and nice, and he's going through and he calls someone naughty, and then there's kind of this annoying elf character who complains, oh, we can't use the word naughty anymore, they're misunderstood, or they have ADHD. And like Tim Allen's Santa is like getting a little like annoyed that he's having to like stop and like accept these new rules or whatever. And it kind of felt like a little bit of commentary from the show about certain things, and it's not necessarily commentary that I can vibe with. I don't know if I necessarily agree, because then like she says, oh, like, everyone gets gifts. There's nice and misunderstood, but everyone gets gifts. Which again sort of makes Tim Allen sigh or roll his eyes or whatever. And again, it kind of felt like, what are you saying here? Like, it feels like some of your opinions about how the world's changing are kind of creeping into the show a little bit here. So, yeah, the big thing with the episode is that, at the end, a year passes in the episode. It's Christmas night again, and he goes out to deliver presents. And would you believe it? His magic fails and he falls off the roof. I'm assuming he's not dead yet. Maybe he'll get to retire, unlike the last Santa. But I would very much suspect that this is the story of how he retires and passes the torch onto a new Santa Claus, whoever that may be. So that would be my guess. There's some other things set up in the episode. Obviously, you've got the family stuff where the kids are starting to feel really unsatisfied not being around other humans and staying at the North Pole. And you've also got the idea of this tech sort of genius or whoever it is, this enterprising young man who is what's his name? Cal Penn's the actor, but he's like having trouble with his company. We get to see him in the first Christmas where he's with his daughter and he sort of hears the sleigh up above, and then the second Christmas he's on the news talking about failing to deliver things in time for Christmas, and he sees the sleigh and gets an idea, oh, why can't we do this kind of thing. So that's obviously setting up a real world plot for the episode. The cast list here on IMDb mentions that the actor who plays Charlie, which is Tim Allen's son from the original movies from his previous marriage. So he's probably going to show up at some point. But he's listed for the first episode, and I didn't see him or notice him. But it doesn't necessarily mean he wasn't there, but I feel like they would have mentioned who he was. So I'm going to assume that he wasn't. This is a tough one. Ultimately, I didn't really like it that much, and I definitely don't want to watch more of it. But if I'm trying to judge it as a successful comeback to this franchise, like I don't know what to say about it. Like what the story it's telling makes sense, for for this legacy sequel series to be like, this is how his story is going to end. But at the same time, I don't think the jokes are mostly good, and I don't find myself really that compelled by any of the drama in it. I think the problem with this is that it was a decent idea for one movie, and even the sequel, it kind of felt like it was like, okay, you've thought of some new things to do with it, but ultimately, like this was a one movie idea, and it's just I don't know, like I don't really feel much from it, so I can't really recommend this show based on the first episode, and I certainly don't want to watch any more. There's better Christmas things to watch with your time, I think. So there you go. That's my thoughts on the Santa Clauses. Mean, nasty, and cynical as always. What can I say? I'm just a Grinch. I actually quite like Christmas, believe it or not. I've always enjoyed Christmas. I'm an atheist, but I've always enjoyed Christmas. Presents are cool, and trees are cool, and lights and sparkly things. They're all nice. But yeah, that is me. So thank you very much for joining me. It has been a pleasure. I will see you guys next time. You can, of course, support all the content by hitting the super thanks button or going over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and supporting us for as little as $1 per month. But otherwise, that's me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?